Hello everyone, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of Ages of Empires, where we will be going through all the major world empires throughout history. In this episode, we will be covering the Inca Empire and the Songhai Empire. So these are two relatively unique empires because I think we've covered a lot in perhaps Eurasia, but the Inca Empire is one of the most significant in the Americas, and the Askia, or pardon me, the Songhai Empire is one of the most significant in Africa as well. So perhaps it's not that the other regions are overrepresented, but perhaps it's that maybe the Americas and Africa have thus far been underrepresented. As well, we will highlight a specific leader from each empire. So from the Inca Empire, we will highlight Pachacuti, Inca Yapanqui, and from the Songhai Empire, we'll highlight Askia Muhammad I. And at the very end, in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, we will have a comparison between the two leaders to hopefully learn a bit more about them through their differences, and furthermore about their respective empires. So, to start with the first empire, the Inca Empire. So the Inca Empire, also known as the Inca Empire, with a K as well, called Tisuyu by its subjects, which is in the Quechua language for realm of four parts. So as we'll see, there are four Suyu, or four provinces essentially, or four parts. Furthermore, it was the largest empire in pre-Columbia America. So we had the two largest Mesoamerican empires previously covered, for example, Peripecha and the Aztec Empire, but this is the largest in all of pre-Columbia America, so very significant. The administrative, political, and military center of the empire was the city of Cusco, a great city in Peru, very high in elevation, actually quite difficult to breathe. I've been fortunate to visit that beautiful city. Furthermore, the Inca civilization rose from the Peruvian highlands sometime around the 13th century CE, that's Common Era. The Spanish began the conquest of the Inca Empire, however, in 1532, as we shall see, and by 1572, the last Inca state was fully conquered. So, sort of a tragic but also great tale, as we shall see. So, starting with the origins and expansion of the Inca Empire from the periods of circa, that means approximately 1200 to 1438 CE. So, the Inca Empire, also known as the Tawantinsuyu in Quechua, the language, began as a small highland kingdom in the Andean region, the Andes Mountains, in South America. The traditional founding date is around 1200 CE, marking the official, maybe earliest dates of the empire, but we officially consider the Inca Empire to begin in 1438, as we shall see, with the establishment of the city of Cusco during this time in 1200 CE by the first Sapa Inca, or emperor, known as Manco Capac. According to legend, Manco Capac and his sister wife, Mama Okello, supposedly related to the sun god himself, Ita, were children of the sun god, Inti, and emerged from Lake Titicaca to found Cusco. So the sort of semi-mythical or semi-related to a god beginning of an empire, as we might see, for example, in the history of Rome, for example, as highlighted by Virgil, for example, or, for example, with Pericles as well, so somewhat mythical according to Plutarch's Parallel Lives. So it seems to be, as the earlier foundings of empires we find, sort of the more linked to a religious significance. The founding of Rome, Romulus and Remus were allegedly, perhaps, some religious significance out their upbringing, or perhaps even raised by wolves, for example. So essentially, the further back one goes back in time, the more sort of mixed with mythology. But perhaps it's true. Maybe perhaps the first founders of Cusco were in fact related to the sun god Inti. As for the period of expansion from 1438 to 1527 CE, so the true transformation of the Inca state into a sprawling empire that we consider the Inca Empire today began with Viracocha's son, Pachacuti, whom we will highlight in a specific biography, Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui, who assumed power in around 1438, marking the start of the Inca Empire. Pachacuti is credited with reorganizing the kingdom into an empire and initiating vast territorial expansions. So Is it an empire if it's not expanding and conquering is debatable, but this empire did, so therefore likely and certainly qualifies itself as an empire by almost any metric. Certainly any metric I can think of. His reforms include the establishment of a centralized government, a very key feature of many of the empires we've covered, and the construction of infrastructure such as roads and storehouses, and the imposition of the Quechua language across the empire. So a common theme also, implementing a single language is also a way of centralizing authority, not necessarily through physical means. Pachacuti's military campaigns extended Inca control across much of the Andean region, that's the Andean mountains once again. He subdued the Chansa people, a significant rival, and incorporated their territory. Under Pachacuti and his successors, the empire expanded rapidly, eventually stretching from modern-day Colombia in the north to central Chile in the south. So I've been fortunate to visit Chile, but not Colombia thus far. Notable emperors following Pachacuti included his son, Toba Inca, Yapanqui, and his grandson, Huayna Capac. These rulers continued the policy of expansion and consolidation, bringing diverse people under the Inca rule. So also common thing about empires is they often include multiple groups of peoples. As for administration and society under the Inca Empire was known for its highly organized and centralized administrative structure. The empire was divided into 4 regions, or sayus, essentially like provinces in some ways, each governed by an appointed official, or satrapies as we saw in the Persian Empire, for example. The Incas implemented a complex system of record keeping using quipus, which are knotted strings that recorded numerical data. You see similar to that in some of the North American indigenous communities as well. Inca society was hierarchical, with the Sapa Incas at the top, considered as a divine figure, so almost like our Egyptian empires we've seen as well, where the king is, or the pharaoh is also the god, or at least connected or somewhat a divine figure. Below him were the nobility, including priests, military leaders, and administrators. So a lot of parallels we see with many of the other empires we have covered. The general populace, or commoners, were organized into ayllus, which are kinship groups that collectively worked the land and paid taxes. So sort of centralizing through grouping people is another way of centralizing authority, it seems. Often to form labor for state projects, as we shall see some massive state projects in terms of architecture, for example, like Machu Picchu, as we shall see. Agriculture was the economic backbone, furthermore, of the empire, with advanced technologies of terrace farming and irrigation, allowing for the cultivation of crops on the challenging Andean environment. So it must also be noted, not only was this empire significant in its region, it also has a very difficult region to rule over. It's very mountainous, it's very high in elevation. Having been to Cusco and Machu Picchu, for example, it's very hard to breathe. Like one would have to be in quite better significant shape to run a marathon, for example, in Cusco than on close to sea level because of the oxygen limitations. But one of the reasons, according to Guns, Germs, and Steel, that the populations of the Incas was greater than other indigenous communities was that they had combined both a bean and a rice to create a full protein, therefore allowing to serve larger populations. I believe it's the lima bean, which would fit with Lima. The Incas also developed extensive road networks and communication systems, facilitating movement of the armies, goods, and information across vast distances. So also important road building to not only share information but also resources. As for challenges, however, and civil war in the periods of 1527 to 1532, the empire faced internal challenges, especially following the death of Huayna Capac around 1527 CE. A devastating smallpox epidemic brought by the European explorers as well, killed the emperor and many of his heirs. So this Guns, Germs, and Steel, for example, not only did they have, for example, armored cavalry, they also brought with them significant diseases which exacerbated the threats. Furthermore, Huayna Capac's sons, Atahualpa and Huascar, became embroiled in a brutal civil war for control of the empire. So we often note that external factors exacerbate the internal factors. So perhaps because there was this external threat, there was a civil war caused. So maybe capitalizing on the sort of disorder, trying to claim more power internally. Atahalapa eventually emerged victorious, but the conflict had severely weakened the state and left it vulnerable to external threats. So there's now the internal now exacerbating the external as well, so they essentially feed into each other. But maybe in this case the external effect might have been sufficient, but nonetheless there were significant internal factors that led to the decline of the Inca Empire. So as for the Spanish conquest from the periods of 1532 to 1572, the end of the Inca Empire. So in 1532, Spanish conquistadors led by Francisco Pizarro arrived in the northern coast of Peru. Maybe it's just ingrained in my head, but some of these names like Pizarro and Cortez sound quite intimidating, but maybe that's just because culture has sort of brought me up in that way. But Pizarro does sound bizarre. It sounds quite intimidating. Nonetheless, Francisco Pizarro arrived in the northern coast of Peru in this period in 1532. The Spanish took advantage of the Inca's weakened state and internal division, so therefore, once again, the internal affecting the external. Pizarro captured Atahalapa, the Inca king, in a surprise ambush in the Battle of Cajamarca. Despite paying a massive ransom in gold and silver, Atahualpa, pardon me for my pronunciation, I'll try to get that right now here, Atahualpa was executed by the Spanish. So even they tried to negotiate, they tried to give them their gold and their silver, but he was still, unfortunately, executed. So perhaps not a very ethical way of doing business the Spanish did, or the conquistadors at least. Following Atahualpa's death, the Spanish continued their conquest, facing sporadic resistance from the Inca loyalists. So although their king was defeated, they still maintained resistance. However, they captured Cusco in 1533 CE and installed a puppet ruler, Manco Inca Yapanqui, who later rebelled against the Spanish but was ultimately defeated. So they implemented this puppet ruler, but he also even rebelled against the Spanish, but they were ultimately still defeated. So it was not an absolute linear decline of the Inca Empire, but sort of a slow decline with periods of significant resistance as well. The final stronghold of the Inca resistance, the city of Vilcabamba, fell to the Spanish in 1572 CE, marking the end of the Inca Empire. So as for the legacy, the fall of the Inca Empire had a profound consequence for the indigenous peoples of the Andes. The Spanish imposed colonial rule, exploiting the region's rich resources and establishing new social and economic order. Despite the destruction of their political structure, and many aspects of Inca culture and tradition persisted and continue to influence Andean societies today. The legacy of the Inca Empire is evident in surviving architecture, as we shall see, agricultural practices, and the Quechua language, which remains widely spoken still in the region. So people still speak this, and for example, Machu Picchu is perhaps one of the greatest sites in the world still to this day. So fortunately, that was not destroyed, among other architectural achievements. And perhaps there might even be more that might even be hidden. For example, Machu Picchu was rediscovered by Hiram Bingham, for example. So maybe there's more rediscoveries to be made within the Inca Empire. Or perhaps even El Dorado, supposedly the lost civilization or hidden city. So to highlight a specific leader, Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui. So Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui, also called Pachacutec, was the 9th Sapa Inca, so king of the Incas, of the kingdom of Cusco, which he transformed into the Inca Empire. So he officially formed the Inca Empire. He was still a civilization there before, but he was considered the first emperor of the Inca Empire. Also known as in Quechua, Tahuantinsuyu, which is the 4 parts, or the 4 Suyus. Most archaeologists now, however, believe that the famous Inca site of Machu Picchu was built as an estate for Pachacuti, so also being the first empire, perhaps its most significant site, perhaps one of the most significant sites of all time, was perhaps built for him as his estate. So as for the early life and ascendancy of Pachacuti, Inca Yapanqui, often simply known as Pachacuti, was one of the most transformative and significant rulers of the Inca Empire. Born in the early 15th century, likely around 1418, he was the son of Viracocha Inca, the 8th Sapa Inca. His birth name was Kusi Yapanqui, who was not originally the heir to the throne. His older brother, Urco, was designated successor. Pachacuti's rise to power began under dramatic circumstances, so he did have royal blood, but he was second in line to the throne, so not the easiest upbringing, but still maybe better than for the case for many others. Around 1438, the Inca capital of Cusco faced a major threat from Chansa, a powerful rival group. With his father and brother fleeing the city, young Kusi Yapanqui took charge of the defense of Cusco, so his father and brother fled. Demonstrating exceptional leadership and systemic strategic acumen, he organized the city's defense and successfully repelled the Chansa attack. His victory earned him great respect and the new name Pachacuti, meaning he who remakes the world. So really a great title. We have a lot of the greats, but Pachacuti, to one who recreates the world, is a really, really significant title that we have not seen ever before, at least of the leaders we've highlighted. So as for his reforms and consolidation, after his decisive victory, Pachacuti became the 9th Sapa Inca, sort of getting the throne as opposed to his brother, and perhaps even creating the throne, because it was not an empire under his father or what should have perhaps been his, or could have perhaps been his brother's. His reign marked a period of profound transformation and expansion of the Inca state. He is credited with laying the foundation for the Inca Empire, or the Tawantinsuyu, or the 4 regions. So as for some of his administrative reforms, Pachacuti implemented extensive administrative reforms to centralize and strengthen the governance of the empire. So almost all the rises of empires have started with centralization. So by doing so, he formalized the early stages of the empire. He reorganized the state into 4 suyus, or 4 regions, kind of like satrapies or even provinces today, or states as well in the United States. He governed by loyal Inca nobles. So, for example, in the Persian case, there's satrapies ruled by satraps, who are sort of regional governors. Although it seems like power is being removed from the king by having these sort of loyal, faithful subjects who also have power through them, it's actually a way of strengthening the authority. As we discussed in the old regime in the French Revolution, that by Alexis de Tocqueville, one of the reasons supposedly of the French Revolution was that the aristocracy was removed, so it was just the king as surrounded by the mob. So here, by creating an aristocracy or creating governors, it actually strengthens the central leader. He reorganized the state into 4 suyus mentioned, each governed by a loyal, important word, Inca noble. These were Chinchayusu, which is in the northwest, Antisuyu, which is in the northeast and includes Cusco, the capital, and Contisuyu in the southwest, and Colasuyu in the southeast. So, and Suyu is essentially their province, all radiating out of Cusco. This restructuring helped manage the growing empire more effectively. So also, there's the term divide and conquer. It certainly applies here. By dividing it, it's perhaps more manageable. As for infrastructure and urban planning under this great leader, one of Pachacuti's most notable achievements was the transformation of Cusco into the imperial capital, and one of the most beautiful and significant historical sites today. He initiated the construction of remarkable structures, including the Cochicanchat, or the Temple of the Sun, which became the religious heart of the empire. And also it must be noted that the royal family is allegedly connected by Inti, who is the god of the sun too. Pachacuti also oversaw the construction of the extensive network of roads and bridges, very not only important in trade and also in terms of information sharing, but also all the more significant considering the difficult geography of the Andes region, facilitating communication, trade, and military movements as well across the vast empire. So as for military expansion, under Pachacuti's leadership, the Inca army undertook numerous military campaigns, significantly expanding the empire's territory. He conquered vast areas, including the Chimu kingdoms in the north, and integrated various cultures and peoples into the Inca state. So perhaps, as we've seen, many are like this, but also not all empires are like this. This was perhaps a multi-ethnic and multicultural empire, perhaps out of necessity or perhaps out of choice. Pachacuti's military strategies and diplomacy ensured that the newly acquired regions were loyal to Cusco, so not by both military and diplomacy, the sword and the stick, as they say. As for his cultural and religious contributions, Pachacuti was a devout follower of the Inca religion, which venerated the sun god Inti, perhaps to his own benefit by his affiliation with that god. He reinforced the religious importance of Cusco as the center of the Inca world and promoted the worship of Inti throughout the empire, so also promoting the center, Cusco as the center state, but also the religious capital. Pachacuti's reign also saw the enhancement of the Inti Raymi festival, a significant religious ceremony dedicated to the sun god, which continues to be celebrated in modern Peru. So maybe something we're seeing in this empire also is a convergence to a single god, which seems allegedly might be a theme from multi-gods to single gods, or polytheism to monotheism. He commissioned the compilation of the Inca's oral histories and legends, which preserved and were passed down through generations. This effort helped consolidate the unified Inca identity and cultural heritage that still exists today. So by documenting this, it also sort of centralized it and formalized the histories and the cultures of the Inca people that is still studied today. As for his later life and legacy, Pachacuti ruled for approximately 3 decades, during which he transformed the Inca state into a powerful and cohesive empire. He designated his son Tupac Inca Yapanqui, Tupac like Tupac Shakur, actually spelled similarly, but I'm not sure if there's any connection, as his successor, ensuring a smooth transition of power. So often some of our greatest leaders, often those who are at the peak, although they might be great within their own light, do not guarantee a smooth succession transition. Yapanqui at least endeavored to do so himself, ensuring a smooth transition of power. Pachacuti continued to advise and support Tupac Inca during his early years of his reign. So also, as discussed, for example, in decline and fall of the Roman Empire, sometimes there would be a transition within the life of a previous empire to make it more smooth, not only because it gives a transition period, but necessarily if it's not done while the other is alive, it's a surprise. Nonetheless, there's a lot of prediction or an accurate estimate when the current emperor might die, which is very unlikely, especially given technology even today. So, but nonetheless, he transitioned it during his lifetime, which is both humble but also practical as well, further stabilizing the empire. Pachacuti's death around 1471 marked the end of his remarkable era. His legacy endured through the continued expansion and consolidation of the empire by his successors. The administrative, infrastructural, and cultural foundation he established were instrumental in the longevity and cohesion of the Inca Empire. So for assessment and historical significance, Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui is often regarded as the greatest of the Inca rulers, and the founder as well, or the first emperor. His vision and reforms transformed a small highland kingdom into one of the most powerful and sophisticated empires in pre-Columbian America, perhaps the most significant. His achievements in governance, architecture, and military conquest laid the groundwork for an empire that would awe the Spanish conquistadors upon their arrival. So that is an important note. Although the Spanish conquistadors were ultimately dominant, they were still awed by how impressive and how unique and how different the Incas were from what they had experienced in Europe. The impact of Pachacuti's reign is still evident today in the enduring structures he commissioned, such as Machu Picchu, a great, absolutely beautiful site I've been fortunate to visit, which he is believed to have been built as a royal estate during his reign. His contributions of Inca statecraft, culture, and religion have left an indelible mark on the history of the Andes and continue to be studied and admired by historians and archaeologists worldwide. So absolutely fascinating leader and empire, in my opinion. I'd be grateful to visit this region again as well, Peru and Machu Picchu, for example. So as for the content of the slide, so in the top left we have Pachacuti, a depiction from the mid-18th century painting, an anonymous painting, but we might get an idea of how he might have dressed, and at least a lot of the gold and sort of the regalness he might have had. To the right of that, we have an image of Inti, the sun god and the national patron of the Inca Empire, as represented by Jose Bernardo de Tagle, who is a Peru, who is one of the later presidents of Peru. To the right of that, we have the great Machu Picchu itself, a very great image. It was rediscovered by Hiram Bingham, a great explorer. I do admire explorers, although some of them are more nuanced, some of them did some bad things. I still think it's quite brave to be bushwhacking in this region without lights, without electricity, without a map, without Google Maps would be quite brave. Especially not necessarily this region because it's higher up, so there aren't as many threats. But for example, in the Amazon rainforest, it's probably the most terrifying place I've ever seen. Below that, we have an Inca prince being accompanied by nobles, priests, and warriors, so showing that not only did the importance of the nobility, having the priests, warriors, etc., but also how dominant or important he was, being carried, for example, not even having to walk. But also, as we'd also see with the image of Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui, the colorfulness of their dress is very unique as well. Below that, we have Atahualpa, the last Sapa Inca, the last emperor of the empire, who was executed by the Spanish on the 29th of August, 1533. This is a painting by Luis Montero. So great image. They're wearing black, very wealthy color at the time, but also tragic scene. We can also see some parallels as well with, for example, Socrates, the death of Socrates. The image even, in my mind, shows parallels. To the right of that and up above, we have both Manco Capac and Mama Ocilo, who were the children of Inti. And this is a depiction by Felipe Guman Poma de Ayala, or in El Primer Nueva Crónica y Buen Gobierno, circa in 1615. So created after, but nonetheless showing the two sort of founding figures, the male and the female, both descendants, or supposedly children of Inti, the sun god. So sort of maybe even like the Adam and Eve of the civilization. Below that, we have the first image of the Inca in Europe. So the Inca came and visited, or they were brought there, produced by Pedro Cieza de Leon, Crónica del Perú in 1553. So it's a very important time where not only were the Spanish coming to Peru, but also for some of the Incas to go, or not necessarily the kings themselves, but for some of those of the Inca Empire to go back, for example, to Spain. And so on both sides they saw maybe how different they were. So, but also I think the depiction is actually they make him. It does not look too derogatory as well. They sort of still have their greatness, and it seems like the Spanish are curious rather than derogatory or patronizing. As for additional information, we have in the date of 1438, Pachacuti created the Tawantinsuyu, which are the four realms. The civil war between Huascar and Atahualpa was from 1529 to 1532, exacerbating the external threats to come, and with the Spanish conquest led by Francisco Pizarro in 1533 it began, so right after the Civil War. So the two exacerbated each other, and ending in 1572 with the ultimate defeat. And the end of the last Inca resistance was once again in 1572 CE. The empire was preceded by the Kingdom of Timor, the Kingdom of Cusco, and the Aymara kingdoms. And the empire was succeeded by New Castile, New Toledo, New Andalusia, and the Neo-Inca state. And in the top right, we have a map. So we have the four Suyus. So Chin Chan Suyu, Suyu is essentially state in the northwest. We have Kuntin Suyu, which is in the sort of central west. Antisuyu, which is in the sort of central east, and it includes Cusco as well, sort of in high elevation with the Andes Mountains, and Colasuyu in sort of the southwest, but also just south generally. So the four realms, a very important defining feature of this empire. We can also see parallels with the Aztecs, which was a combination of three city-states. So that is the very fascinating Inca Empire and Pachacuti, Inca Yapanqui, in my opinion. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll discuss the leader more in the comparison at the end after discussing the Songhai Empire. So the Songhai Empire was a state located in the western part of Sahel during the 15th and 16th centuries CE. At its peak, it was one of the largest African empires in history. The state is known by its historiographical name, derived from the peoples, derived by the largest ethnic group and ruling elite, the Songhai people. So they didn't necessarily call the empire the Songhai Empire, but the largest and ruling people were the Songhai people, so we can call it the Songhai Empire in terms of historiography. Songhai Ali established Gao as the empire's capital, although the Songhai state had existed in and around Gao since the 11th century. Other important cities in the kingdom were Timbuktu, we covered, for example, was significant under the Mali Empire, and Djenné, where the urban-centered trade flourished. They were conquered in 1468 and 1475, respectively. Those two cities they captured into the Songhai Empire. Initially, the Songhai Empire, or Songhai Empire often referred to, was ruled by the Soni dynasty from circa 1464 to 1493, but it was later replaced by the Askia dynasty from 1493 to 1591. So for the origins and growth of this important empire, starting in the circa 9th century until the 1430. So the Songhai Empire was one of the largest and most powerful empires in West African history. Originated as a small kingdom centered around the town of Gao on the Niger River. The Songhai people, or Songhai people, were believed to have settled in the region as early as the 9th century, gradually establishing Gao as a prominent trading hub due to its strategic location along the trans-Saharan trade routes. We'll also note there's access to gold and significant trade routes running through this region. Furthermore, however, it wasn't until the rise of the Sunni dynasty in the 14th century that the Songhai began to expand significantly. Sunni Ali Kolon, a prominent ruler, led Songhai's initial expansion and consolidating control over the surrounding regions and laying the foundations for a centralized state. So, starting for the expansion under Sunni Ali from 1464 to 1492. The true transformation of the Songhai from a kingdom to an empire began under the reign of Sunni Ali Bear, who ruled from 1464 to 1492. Sunni Ali was a formidable military leader and strategist. He expanded the empire through a series of conquests, effectively utilizing Songhai cavalry and river navy to dominate neighboring states. So innovative military tactics, firstly having access to cavalry, but also the river navy. As for the conquest of Timbuktu and Djenné, so one of Sunni Ali's most notable achievements was the conquest of Timbuktu in 1468, the former significant and capital city of the Mali Empire, which we covered, and now still the capital of Mali. Many great friends from Mali very much like to visit, for example, Timbuktu someday. Timbuktu was a center of Islamic learning and commerce, and its capture significantly enhanced the Songhai's prestige and wealth. Sunni Ali captured the city of Djenné as well, also a very significant city, in 1475, after a prolonged siege, further consolidating his control over the important trade routes and urban centers. So, starting from Gao and then capturing Timbuktu and Djenné, very significantly expanded this important empire. As for administrative reforms, Sunni Ali implemented significant administrative reforms to manage the growing empire. He had divided the empire into provinces, each governed by an appointed official, and established a system of taxation to support the central administration and military. So as we saw with the Inca Empire, sort of divide and conquer by creating provinces. It's more easy to manage, but also by creating governors, the king himself has more power through their loyalty. Who, for example, if they had no governor, there's no one really who necessarily owes something to the king. For example, by creating a governor, they necessarily have that loyalty, and there's necessarily sort of a someone to blame things on if things don't go well. Sonny Ali's reign marked a period of relative stability and prosperity as he maintained control over diverse and expansive territory. So also similar perhaps to the Inca Empire, as we paired this episode with, or this empire with, it was multicultural and multi-religious and multilingual empire, perhaps likely through necessity, but also perhaps through choice as well. As for the Golden Age under Askia Muhammad, whom we will highlight in a specific biography, this is the period 1493 to 1528. Following Sunni Ali's death in 1492, a power struggle ensued, culminating in the rise of Askia Muhammad I, also known as Askia the Great, so one of the few people to have the great title associated with their name or attributed to their name. Askia Muhammad's reign from 1493 to 1528 is often regarded as the golden age of the Songhai Empire. As for Islamic governance and reforms, Askia Muhammad was a devout Muslim and sought to strengthen Islamic governance within the empire. So he also, maybe unique to some leaders, but also like other leaders, really was focused on implementing religion. In some ways it's a way of centralizing things, some ways it's to their own interest as a leader, and sometimes it's through their own religious fervor. We shall discuss which we believe it might have been for Askia to come. He reformed as well the legal system by introducing Islamic law, Sharia law, and we have episodes on Sharia law. I'd be grateful if you support those episodes as well, and established Islamic courts as well. Askia Muhammad also promoted education and learning, supporting the establishment of schools and mosques throughout the empire. So very important, but also perhaps a way of sort of directing the culture of the empire. As for administrative efficiency, to enhance administrative efficiency, Askia Muhammad expanded and refined the bureaucratic system. He appointed capable officials to key positions, ensuring effective governance and control over the vast empire. The empire was divided into, as mentioned, several provinces, each overseen by a governor who reported directly to the empire. So also like satraps, as we saw with the Persian Empire. As for economic and cultural flourishing, under Askia Muhammad's, Songhai became a major center of commerce, attracting traders from all across Africa and beyond. So not only expanding through military conquest, but also knowing how to trade and also knowing how to interact in a positive way with neighboring empires or states. Under Askia Muhammad, Songhai became a major center of commerce, as mentioned, attracting traders from beyond. The empire's wealth was built on the trade of gold, as we shall see it's very close to and includes some gold mines, salt, and other valuable trade commodities. Timbuktu and Gao flourished in centers of learning and culture, attracting scholars, poets, and intellectuals, who also with them by bringing these intellectuals and poets and artists, they also increase the economy because they need to eat, they need to purchase things as well. However, came the decline and fall of this important empire from the periods of 1528 to 1591. So, as we often have at the Golden Age, necessarily things fall. Sometimes there's multiple Golden Ages, but often after a Golden Age, things taper off. So, the decline of the Songhai Empire began in the later years of Askia Muhammad's reign and continued under his successors. So, starting with internal conflicts, succession disputes, and external pressures gradually weakened the empire. So, starting with internal strife, Askia Muhammad was deposed in 1528 by his son. So, pretty rough way to go about it. One's own son takes the throne from them. Askia Musa was his name, leading to a period of instability and infighting among his descendants. So if one kills their own father, it's kind of setting a bad precedent for their own children. The lack of clear and stable succession plan resulted in frequent power struggles and weakened central authority. So these internal factors, as we shall see, will exacerbate external factors as well. So as for external threats, the empire faced increasing pressure from external threats, particularly from the rise of the Moroccan Saadi dynasty. Morocco is a country I'm fortunate to visit, and we'll highlight the Saadi dynasty indirectly or directly to come as well. In 1591, the Saadian Sultan Ahmed al-Mansur sent a well-equipped army to conquer Songhai. The Moroccans, armed with firearms, decisively defeated the Songhai forces at the Battle of Tondibi. So one of the first references we have to firearms here. And in fact, this is the first, perhaps firearms were perhaps also used in the conquest of the Inca Empire to some degree, but it was largely on, for example, cavalry, etc. But this is also one of the earliest references we have to guns in this region of the world. As for the collapse of the empire following the Moroccan invasion, Gao and Timbuktu were captured, and the Songhai Empire effectively disintegrated. So their two great cities that they had captured were then taken from them, and Gao, their own capital, was taken from them. So Timbuktu they took, but it was taken back from them. But Gao, was their original capital, was also taken. The Moroccans established control over key cities, but their rule was tenuous and faced resistance from local populations. So they did not go out with a whisper. They kept fighting throughout, as we saw, for example, with the Inca resistance. The once great Songhai Empire, however, fragmented into smaller states and ceased to exist as a unified political entity, and therefore no longer an empire, although there still were remnants of the Songhai Empire. As for the legacy of this very significant empire, the fall of the Songhai Empire marked the end of one of Africa's most powerful and influential empires. Despite its decline, the legacy of the Songhai's achievements in governance, trade, culture, and Islamic scholarship endured. The cities of Timbuktu and Gao remained and still remain important centers of learning and culture for centuries, and even until this day. Songhai's contributions to West African history and civilization are remembered through its architectural achievements, historical records, and cultural heritage. The empire's rise and fall exemplify that dynamic and complex history of pre-colonial Africa, highlighting the region's rich traditions of statecraft, commerce, and intellectual pursuit. Very, very fascinating empire and region. So as to highlight a specific leader, Askia Muhammad I, who created the Golden Age, or ruled over the Golden Age of the Songhai Empire. Perhaps a good way of looking at an empire is when it's at its zenith, or it's at its Golden Age, is probably the things the empire most wanted to manifest, or the things that most allowed it to succeed are most manifested also in this Golden Age. So Askia Muhammad I, who lived from 1443 to 1538, was born Muhammad ibn Ibi Bakr al-Turi, or Muhammad Ture, who was the first ruler of the Askia dynasty of the Songhai Empire, reigning from 1493 to 1528 CE. He is also known as Askia the Great, and his name in modern Songhai is Mamar Kase. Askia Muhammad strengthened his empire and made it the largest empire in West Africa's history. At its peak under his reign, the Songhai Empire encompassed the Hausa states as far as Kano in present-day northern Nigeria, and much of the territory that had belonged to the Songhai Empire in the east as well. His policies resulted in the rapid expansion of trade with Europe and Asia, the creation of many schools, and the establishment of Islam as an integral part of the empire. So many different facets of his influence on the empire. So, to start with his early life and rise to power. Askia Muhammad I, also known as Askia the Great, was born Muhammad Ture around 1443 CE in the Songhai Empire, so within its borders. His early life and details, however, are scarce, but he emerged from the nobility of the empire, but not necessarily the dynasty, likely from a noble family of mixed Soninke and Songhai heritage, so it's perhaps somewhat of mixed cultures in his lineage, not just Songhai, also Soninke. He served under Suni al-Iber, the empire's previous ruler of a different dynasty, and gained prominence as a capable military leader and administrator. So very common for our successful leaders, at least at this time, had a strong knack or strong ability in terms of military achievement. So following Suni Ali's death in 1492, the empire plunged into a succession crisis. Suni Ali's son, assumed the throne but faced opposition due to his perceived lack of commitment to Islam. So Muhammad Ture capitalized on this discontent, leading a revolt against Suni Baru. In 1493, Muhammad Ture defeated Suni Baru in a battle and declared himself emperor, taking the title Askia, which means forceful one, but it also might mean emperor. But nonetheless, he took it. One of the reasons he succeeded was that he brought the Islam that the people wanted, that the previous dynasty or the previous heir to the dynasty did not provide them. but also allegedly by taking it by force, which is somewhat unique from our empires, but particularly unique within our zenith periods. Usually it's perhaps a founding period, it was taken by force, but to take it by force and then also have the peak is quite unique. As for consolidation of power and administrative reforms after he took the throne, Askia Muhammad's reign was marked the beginning of the golden age of the Songhai Empire. He implemented comprehensive administrative reforms to consolidate his power and enhanced the empire's efficiency. For example, centralization and bureaucracy. Askia Muhammad centralized the administration by dividing the empire into provinces, each governed by an appointed official known as a farba, so kind of like a satrap or a governor. And once again, strengthening his own authority by having these governors in place who have allegiance to him for the power he gave them, and also someone to have accountability for the governance. Furthermore, he established a sophisticated bureaucracy with various levels of administration, overseeing different aspects of governance. So a bigger bureaucracy is more centralization, necessarily. This system allowed for more effective control and management of the empire's vast territories. As for taxation and revenue, he introduced a standardized system of taxation, ensuring a steady flow of revenue to support the central government and military. Taxes were collected in the form of grain, cattle, and other goods, so collected in terms of product, which were then redistributed to maintain the empire's infrastructure and fund state projects. So, like the satrapies in the Persian Empire previously, under, for example, apparently it was Darius, according to Herodotus, who first formalized the tributes of the satrapies. They still had tributes before Darius. It seems like under Askia Muhammad I, he also formalized the taxation process for his peoples. But also, as we note, the fact that there was taxation means that there was private enterprise and at least somewhat of a flourishing economy, which was not only somewhat a flourishing economy, as we shall see in its trade routes. One of the most significant features of Askia Muhammad I was his promotion of Islam. So a devout Muslim, Askia Muhammad also sought to strengthen the Islamic faith within the empire, and perhaps it was one of the reasons he came to power in the first place. So perhaps it was through necessity, but it was also likely through his own religious fervor. He undertook a pilgrimage to Mecca in 1496, emulating the journey of Mansa Musa of Mali. So we highlighted Mansa Musa as one of the most significant leaders of Mali, who took this epic trip, almost like a triumph, to Mecca. So this inspiration fed into Askia Muhammad I, who did this trip to Mecca as well, but also it's a testament to his connection with Islam, which the people wanted, at least and the previous dynasty had not been providing them with, which bolstered the legitimacy and his legitimacy and religious standing. During his pilgrimage, he forged diplomatic and religious ties with the broader Islamic world, bringing back scholars, books, and religious artifacts. So also, by creating a connection with Islam, he also creates allies with many strong Islamic empires as well, and particularly on his trip to Mecca. But also, by knowledge sharing, by opening it up to the Islamic world, there's many Islamic scholars who would come into the region and also strengthen their economy as well. As for Islamic law and education, Askia Muhammad introduced Sharia, or Islamic law, and we have an episode highlighting that, I'm grateful if you support it, as the legal framework of the empire. He established Islamic courts and appointed judge or qadis, who are judges, to administer justice according to Islamic principles. So not necessarily a secular, or not a non-secular judicial system, but a secular judicial system. Furthermore, he promoted Islamic education by founding schools, and supporting existing centers of learning, particularly in Timbuktu and Gao. So not only was he able to conquer, but he was also promoted education, but education through the lens of Islam, which also in some ways was self-serving to his own leadership, or at least centralized authority. Timbuktu, under his patronage, became a renowned center for Islamic scholarship and remains so today, attracting scholars and students from across the Muslim world. As for his military and economic achievements, Askia Muhammad expanded and secured the empire's borders through a series of military campaigns and strategic alliances. His military reforms included the organization of a professional military army, so a standing army, something feared in the prince, for example, or feared in the Federalist Papers, but in some ways. Well, the prince they more fear mercenaries, but a standing army is often can be a good thing because but also it's very a costly thing as well. His military reforms included the organization of a professional army, which was equipped with cavalry and riverine forces as mentioned. Also, they had ability to have a navy on the rivers as well, which are, as we can see, the empire was riddled with rivers, which they dominated. So as for territorial expansion, he successfully extended Songhai's influence into the Sahara, a very difficult region to conquer because of the lack of resources, consolidating control over vital trade routes and resources. His conquests included the regions of Air and Agadez, further enhancing the empire's wealth and strategic importance. So in regions like the Sahara that are sort of vast territories of, for example, no resources where one would starve or die of thirst, the trade routes are very, very important to control and essentially, in some ways, have monopolies. Furthermore, as for trade and commerce, under Askia Muhammad's rule, the Songhai Empire became a major hub of trans-Saharan trade. The empire's wealth was built on the trade of gold, as we shall see, salt, slaves, and other commodities. If one, at the time, slaves were considered a commodity. Askia Muhammad fostered trade relations with neighboring states and distinct regions, ensuring the flow of goods and cultural exchanges. So not only did he know when to conquer and take a trade route, he also knew when to trade. And sometimes trading, for example, with a partner, someone who could potentially be a threat, it sort of diffuses the threat if one has a good trading relationship. As for Askia Muhammad I's later years and legacy, Askia Muhammad's later years were marked by a decline in his health and challenges to his authority. In 1528, he was deposed by his son Askia Musa, who exiled to an island in the Niger River. So, very unfortunately, he was exiled, not necessarily assassinated by his son, but nonetheless deposed. He died in 1538, but his legacy as a transformative and visionary ruler endured. So, maybe as powerful as he was, maybe he did not have. And maybe for all the sway he had over his kingdom, having taken it from a different dynasty, he was not able to control his own son. So as for his legacy, Askia Muhammad's reign is often regarded as the pinnacle of the Songhai Empire's power and cultural flourishing. His administrative, legal, and economic reforms established a stable and prosperous state that endured beyond his lifetime. The institutions he created continued to influence the West African governance and culture for centuries, and even till this day. Askia Muhammad's promotion of Islam, very unique, or at least within relative to the previous dynasty of the Songhai Empire, and support for education left an indelible mark on the region. Timbuktu and Gao remained important centers of Islamic learning and culture, preserving and transmitting knowledge for generations, and also by creating connections on his trip to Mecca. Furthermore, Askia Muhammad I is remembered as one of Africa's greatest rulers, whose vision and leadership transformed the Songhai Empire into a dominant and enduring power. His contributions to statecraft, religion, and culture are celebrated in West African history, and his legacy continues to inspire scholars and leaders today. He's a very, very important and fascinating leader, and in some ways tragic as well, but at least with what ultimately happened to him at the hands of his son. So as for the content of the slide, so in the top left, I could not find an image of Askia Muhammad I or even a certain logo of the Songhai Empire, so it ended up just being an image that fit in this. But nonetheless, this is the trade route. So here are the gold mines are here, and all these lines are the trade routes. And as we can cross-reference that with the map, which we shall discuss, the trade routes sort of riddle the empire and seem to be centered also around the empire. Here is Gao, for example. Here and Timbuktu are very close in terms of location. So they started with Gao as their capital and took Timbuktu from the Mali Empire. They also took Djenné, so sort of this is their core location, their trade routes throughout here. But ultimately the Moroccan Empire, which would come from here, proves a very significant threat. As for the title we have, it is one of the largest African empires in history, perhaps the largest Western African empire. The historical name was derived from the largest ethnic group and ruling elite, the Songhai people. The significant leader was Askia Muhammad I. I believe I actually forgot to cover the statistics of the Inca Empire, so we'll quickly cover that first. So the significant leader of the Inca Empire was the Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui, pardon me. The empire was the Inca Empire. Period was from 1438 to 1533 to 1572 CE, which is the pre-Columbian era. Modern locations were Peru, Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, and Colombia. Million square kilometers would be 2. Million square miles would be 0.77. So quite a large region, but it also was quite mountainous. But the population was quite large because they were able to have beans and rice. Percent of the world is 1.48%, excluding Antarctica. Capital was Cusco. The government was a divine absolute monarchy and semi-diarchy. The common languages was Quechua, which was the lingua franca, and the Perquina, which was possibly the elite language and also the state religion, major language, Aymara, Mochica, Barbacoan, and others as well. And the religion was Inca religion. The population was between 10 and 12 million, and that's because they were able to create a complete protein in this region through their irrigation techniques. So pardon me that I missed that in the first run-through, but maybe we can compare it head-to-head with the statistics and information about the Songhai Empire. So, significant leader was Askia Muhammad I. Empire period was from circa 1430s to 1591 CE, which is considered the early modern era. The modern location was Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Benin, Burkina Faso, Mauritania. I have friends from there, but I mess up the pronunciation sometimes, and Senegal. Million square kilometers would be 0.8, but once again, it is a relatively difficult region to rule over. But ruling over, for example, the Sahara is difficult, but once one has it, it's maybe easier to claim because there are select resources that if one controls, one has a significant advantage. The equivalent of million square kilometers would be 0.31%. Of the world would be 0.59%. The capital was Gao, monarchy. The government was a monarchy, largely hereditary, except, for example, in the case of Askia Muhammad I, who created his own dynasty within the empire. Common languages included Songhai, Tuareg, Arabic, Mande, Fulani, Hasua, and Mure. Religion was Sunni Islam, as promoted by Askia Muhammad I, and traditional African religions. And the population was between 3 and 4 million, so a little bit smaller than, for example, the Inca Empire, but still quite larger than many of the empires we covered previously. Some of the greatest empires we covered have only been in the hundreds of thousands. And largely this is because technology has changed and it depends on their access to resources. For example, having 1 million people in the middle of the Sahara would be a lot more difficult than having 1 million people in perhaps the Fertile Crescent at its peak. As for additional images, to the right of the trade routes, and those are the trade routes of the Western Sahara from 1000 to 1500. And once again, the gold fields are indicated in the light brown shadings, which include Bambuk, Bure, Lobi, and Akan gold fields. To the right of that, we have the Timbuktu manuscripts with Arabic writing about mathematics and astronomy, so showing the importance of Arabic, showing the mathematical abilities as well, and astronomical abilities as well. To the right of that, we have the tomb of Askia in Mali, which is claimed to be Askia Muhammad's tomb in Gao in Mali today. So, a site I'd like to visit someday and pay homage to this great leader. Below that, we have as well, city of Timbuktu. So this very distinctive architectural style that still exists in Mali with these sticks jutting out, rods jutting out. Looks really quite intimidating, but very unique. I've never seen any other region have structures like this. As for additional information, so the Songhai state emerges at Gao in circa 1000. The independence from the Mali Empire was in circa 1430s. Soni dynasty begins in 1468. The Askia dynasty, starting with Askia Muhammad I, begins in 1493. The Sadian invasion of the Songhai Empire, those are the Moroccans, in 1491. The nobles moved south to present-day Niger and formed various smaller kingdoms from the external threat, the Sadian invasion, 1591. And the French deposed the last Askia of the Dendi in 1901. So there still existed some Askia, part of the royal family, for many years after, but ultimately defeated by the French. The empire was preceded by the Mali Empire, important empire. I'm grateful if you've seen that episode, and the Gao Empire, which is sort of an empire that became the Songhai Empire from that city. And it was succeeded by the Saadi dynasty based in Morocco, and the Pashalik of Timbuktu, and the Dendi kingdom. And as for the map, we have the Songhai Empire. So we can see once again, we have Gao should be, maybe it's not on this map, but Gao should be around here. As we can see, it's here. It should be around here. I'm not sure why it's not there, but Timbuktu is here. Here's Gao. Gao is here. Timbuktu is here, and Djenné should be around here as well. And see the large region ruled, and we can see the rivers that they had their navies running on, and we can cross-reference that with their trade routes as well, which are concentrated around this region. But then as we get to the Sahara, it's a lot more sort of desolate. But then the threats from the Saadi or the Moroccan Empire from the north would come. So it must be noted that they don't actually have direct access to the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. So, as for a comparison in the style, Plutarch's parallels of Pachacuti, Inca, Yapanqui, and Askia Muhammad I to learn more about how they're unique from their differences, and also more about their respective empires. So, as for their background and rise to power, starting with Pachacuti, Inca, Yapanqui. His origins, Pachacuti was born into the royal Inca family in the early 15th century. He was the son of Viracocha Inca, the 8th Sapa Inca emperor, and was not initially heir apparent, so he had an older brother who was likely to become the heir. His rise to power, Pachacuti rose to prominence during the crisis when Chansa attacked Cusco in 1438. With his father and brother fleeing, Pachacuti took the leadership role and command of the defenses, successfully repelling the Chansa and earning the title. So I think that's one of the most fair ways he can get it. If his brother and father run away, perhaps he's the most worthy of having it. But perhaps it could have ended up a lot worse, and perhaps if he had died, the empire might have still been able to last because the heirs were still living. Pachacuti means he who remakes the world, and his decisive leadership led to the eventual ascension of the as ninth Sapa Inca. As for Askia Muhammad I, his origins, Askia Muhammad was born Muhammad Ture around 1443, so actually somewhat a similar time period as well that they lived, and actually overlapped in terms of years, which is quite unique, but it happens because all of our pairs are chronological, so it actually happens more common than a coincidence might imply, so it's not really a coincidence. But nonetheless, similar time period, but such drastically different parts of the world that such different experiences they had. And he came from a noble family, that's Askia Muhammad I, within the Songhai Empire, but not within the royal family. And he served under Sunni Ali Bear, who was of the royal family. As for his rise to power, after Sunni Ali's death in 1492, a succession crisis ensued, and Sunni Baru, or Ali's son, took the throne but faced opposition. Muhammad Ture capitalized on Sunni Baru's perceived lack of Islamic fervor, and leading to a successful revolt and assuming the title Askia in 1493. So both of them had sort of assumed the title, Pachacuti, Askia, that's a similarity, but lots of leaders that we cover sort of once they have a big achievement, they adopt a new name, like Octavian to Augustus, for example. And even further, emperors within the Roman Empire would adopt the names like Augustus and Caesar once they make greatness or once they come to power. But this is sort of two distinct empires also having a similar thing. When they come to greatness, they create a new name. Also, both of them were probably, when they were growing up, did not expect for themselves to come to the throne, because Pachacuti, Inca, Yapanqui had an older brother. Askia Muhammad I was not even of the royal family, but both of them, Pachacuti, Inca, Yapanqui, perhaps because he was braver than his father and brother and defended the city, became emperor, and Askia Muhammad I, perhaps because Ali Bear was not Islamic enough, or did not have enough religious fervor, therefore had a coup and became emperor. So both of them, through different reasons, but both of them unique in that they both became two of the most famous and most significant leaders within their empires, but were not likely to do so. So likely through their own merit. As for administrative and political reforms, Pachacuti, Inca, Yapanqui, his reorganized the Inca state, creating a highly centralized administration. He divided the empire into 4 suyus, or regions, each governed by a loyal official. This system allowed for efficient governance over vast territories, also centralizing but also divide and conquer, as the cliche term. As for bureaucracy, Pachacuti established a sophisticated bureaucracy with various levels of administration to ensure effective control over and resource management as well. As for Askia Muhammad I, his administrative reforms, he also implemented significant administration reforms. He also divided the empire into provinces, each governed by a farba. So very unique here, where they both did this sort of divide and conquer and created separate provinces, essentially. And he had farbas ruling over them, so kind of like satraps, as we see, for example, with the history of the Persian Empire. His centralized bureaucracy was designed to enhance administrative efficiency. Furthermore, however, he had Islamic governance. He introduced Islamic law, or Sharia law, as the legal framework, establishing Islamic courts and appointing qadis, or judges. So perhaps maybe unique in that sense by promoting that religion. But Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui promoted Inti, the god that his family was associated with. So that both of them promoted a religion that might have been in some ways self-serving, but likely they both believed in it as well. So further on their religious and cultural contributions, so for religious policies, Pachacuti reinforced the worship of Inti, the sun god, and elevated Cusco's status as a religious center. So by connecting the religion to the capital also strengthens it. It's kind of like Rome, and the Catholic Church is also centered in Rome, also strengthens Rome as a capital. He commissioned the construction of significant religious sites as well, such as the Kore Chanka, or the Temple of the Sun, or the Temple of Inti, or the Temple for Inti. As for his cultural impact, he promoted the Quechua language and compiled Inca legends and histories, creating a unified cultural and historical identity, so important for historiography. As for Askia Muhammad I, his religious policies, a devout Muslim, Askia Muhammad promoted Islam throughout the empire, and also perhaps came to power for that region. His pilgrimage to Mecca in 1496 strengthened the religious authority, but maybe it had previously been done, for example, by Mansa Musa of the Mali Empire. He supported the establishment of Islamic schools and the spread of Islamic learning. So they both created institutions, Pachacuti, Inca, Yapanqui, for example, creating the Temple of the Sun, whereas Askia Muhammad I creating schools. So both perhaps different ways of promoting their respective religions. Furthermore, as for his Askia Muhammad I's cultural impact, under his patronage, Timbuktu became a renowned center of Islamic scholarship, attracting scholars and students from across the Islamic world, the Muslim world. As for their military achievements and expansion, Pachacuti, Inca Yapanqui, his military campaigns expanded the Inca Empire through a series of military conquests, incorporating vast territories from modern-day Colombia to Chile. His military strategies and reforms were instrumental in his successes. As for infrastructure, he built an extensive network of roads and bridges to facilitate military movements and administrative control. And perhaps the great site of Machu Picchu, a place of unfortunate visit, and I recommend anyone go there. Hopefully it doesn't get overrun with people, but nonetheless it's probably one of the greatest sites in the world. As for Askia Muhammad in terms of his military campaigns, Askia Muhammad extended the Songhai's influence into the Sahara, a difficult region to conquer, and conquered regions such as Air and Agadez. He organized a professional army as well, equipped with cavalry and riverine forces, so unique military tactics which aren't necessarily documented for Pachacuti. But Askia Muhammad I wasn't necessarily the first one to use these cavalry or river tactics, but nonetheless it's documented that he did. But nonetheless, Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui also was likely using the most innovative military technologies at his time to also be successful. And, for example, there weren't necessarily rivers in the Andes Mountains because it's such significant change in elevation. So maybe the takeaway here is both of them knew how to use to their advantage their regions. For example, the Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui knew how to build roads through the Andes, whereas Askia Muhammad I knew how to build a navy on the rivers, and so basically using to their advantage their regions. As for the economic expansion under Askia Muhammad I, his military successes secured vital trade routes and resources, enhancing the empire's wealth. As for their declines and legacies, so Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui, his succession, Pachacuti ensured a smooth succession by appointing his son Tupac Inca Yapanqui. So even within his own lifetime they transferred the power, as his successor, who continued the policies and expansion. However, and as his legacy is remembered as an architect of the Inca Empire, whose administrative and cultural foundations endured beyond his reign. His contributions to statecraft and infrastructure are still evident today, and he's considered by some to be the first emperor of the Pachacuti Inca, of the Inca Empire, so a founder. As for Askia Muhammad, his succession and decline, Askia Muhammad was deposed by his son, so very different relationships with his son, in 1528 and exiled. So whereas one, even within his own lifetime, gave power to his son, certainly likely a positive relationship, Askia Muhammad I was deposed and exiled by his son, so very, very stark differences here. Despite this, his reforms and policies had long-lasting effects, so even still his son still continued his policies even though he got rid of his father. As for his legacy, Askia Muhammad's reign is celebrated as the golden age of the Songhai Empire. So not necessarily the founder, but the founder of the second dynasty of the Songhai Empire, but the leader of the zenith, or the golden age. So things necessarily fell off after him. But Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui wasn't necessarily at the peak of the Inca Empire, but he was sort of the first emperor. So different periods of time they had. Could Askia Muhammad I have founded the Songhai Empire, or could Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui been as successful as at the peak of the Inca Empire? Is impossible to say, but it must be noted that they did cover sort of different regions within their own time. But because Pachacuti Inca Yapanquis, there still was a royal lineage, we can say that the Inca Empire still might have had continuity, and he wasn't necessarily the founder, but he's considered the first empire when it had the four Suyus, and therefore he is considered the founding figure, whereas Askia Muhammad I may not be considered the founding figure of the Songhai Empire, but the founding figure at least of a dominant dynasty, or the most dominant dynasty likely of the Songhai Empire. So thus, as for in terms of their similarities, both rulers significantly expanded their empires through military conquests. Both rulers implemented extensive administrative reforms to centralize and strengthen their states, and as well their religions that were in some ways both self-serving. They implemented extensive administrative reforms to centralize and strengthen their states, also that divide and conquer method. Both promoted their respective religions and supported cultural and educational advancements as well, and knew how to build, take advantage of trade routes and information sharing as well through potentially difficult geographies. As for some differences, Pachacuti focused on consolidating Inca culture and religious practices, while Askia Muhammad promoted Islamic law and scholarship. So different religions, but nonetheless both promoters. As another difference, Pachacuti's legacy includes monumental architecture and infrastructure, whereas Askia Muhammad is renowned for his promotion of Islamic learning and governance, more creating schools, whereas Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui, for example, Machu Picchu is a very, very significant site that is perhaps has no equal, whereas there are some great sites produced under the Songhai Empire with a great unique architectural style. In terms of difficulty, it might not be quite on par with Machu Picchu, for example. But that's also could be due to the resources they had as well. So it might have just, if they switched places, they might have been equally successful in terms of architecture. Furthermore, Askia Muhammad's rise involved a clear religious component, leveraging Islamic discontent against Sunni Baru, whereas Pachacuti's ascent was more a military prowess and leadership crisis. So the different ways in which both of them came into power. So Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui was the brave one. His father and his brother had fled, whereas Askia Muhammad I gave the people the religion they desired from their leader. So thus, both Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui and Askia Muhammad I are remembered as transformative leaders whose reigns mark the height or the start and the peak of their empires, respectively, power and cultural achievements. So two very, very fascinating leaders, two very, very fascinating empires, two very, very fascinating regions. One I've been fortunate to visit, one I have not been fortunate to visit. So hopefully as I continue to do this, I can visit more of these sites and perhaps give some more details. So thank you very much. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. This is Cashcroft TV. I hope you enjoyed this video on the Inca Empire and Pachacuti Inca Yapanqui and the Songhai Empire and Askia Muhammad I. Thank you very much for your support, and I'd be very grateful if you continue to provide it. Thank you so much.